3 days ago, Brawl Stars came out with a new mode, Siege, and personally, I think it's the best mode they've ever added in. The amount of mechanics and skill that go into it is simply phenomenal, and it's so much fun. So I took it upon myself to rank all 23 Brawlers from 23 to 1 based on what I think is their effectiveness in Siege. When I think of how to effectively judge a Brawler, I'm thinking of 3 different categories. 1, how good are they at securing bolts? 2, how good are they at defending against the enemy robot? And 3, how effectively can they push with the ally robot? Just remember, the amount of time and research that I put into this still doesn't change the fact that this is just my opinion and may be wrong, or maybe my playstyle suits me better for some brawlers than others. So this list is more of a suggestion rather than an official tier list. And with that being said, let's begin. Kicking off with our F tier brawlers, we're going to start the list with number 23, Crow. You'll notice the common trend from the low tier brawlers: not enough damage. Crow is a perfect example of this. His auto can be a slight annoyance, but in the tank meta dominated Siege, the poison just isn't enough to stop a Primo from walking in and yeeting a bolt to the Ike turret. With a max attack of 392 per shot, that means his full clip does 3,528 damage at close range plus the small poison damage. Almost every enemy can survive this, and the ones that can't will be a ranged brawler who won't take the full damage anyway. Just like Jean, Crow suffers from not being able to defend against the robot or to attack with the robot. The one redeeming quality that Crow has is that his ult lets you run away when you grab one bolt, securing one bolt for the whole entire team. As mentioned a second ago, and also F tier, we have number 22, Jean. Jean just isn't meant for this mode at all. He does extremely inferior amounts of damage, leading to an inability to grab bolts, defending against the robot, or provide good support while attacking with the robot. Jean's 2 pluses in this game mode both come from his ultimate. He can drag the robot away from the Ike turret, and he can sometimes drag enemies in range of your Ike turret. However, you'll almost never pull off dragging the enemy in unless they're blind or disconnected. This use of his ult, to delay the robot especially, only helps for about 2 seconds and isn't enough to propel him out of F tier. Jean is simply useless without his ult, and his ult is extremely situational. We only have one brawler in the D tier, and that brawler is Shelly. Shelly got ripped on in Kairos' tier list, but his points are the same as mine. Shelly is not a reliable bolt securer, and while she can do large amounts of damage to the robot on defense, that's all about her value allows due to her low health. This is where Kairos and I differ. He states that the game was all about offense and disregards her ability to defend, whereas I think having at least one brawler who is great on defense is preferred, almost a necessity. While there are better choices than Shelly out there, comps do exist where you can find success with her. Kicking off the C tier and taking 20th place is Tara. Tara is all about control in most modes, which is why she's useful in Brawl Ball and Gem Grab, but her ult, while good, isn't quite as useful in this mode. Tara is very much like combining Crow and Jean, with the ability to pull the robot, control the map, and deal small amounts of damage. While Tara can deal more consistent damage than Crow or Jean, her reload speed is pitiful, and therefore doesn't have as much impact on the tanks at all. Her star power shows little to no use in this mode, being more of a 1-second distraction than anything else. In this game mode, the teams focus on picking a section of the map to secure, with which each brawler covering a third of the map, as well as rotating to adjacent brawlers to assist. With this current format, this makes Tara's ult ineffective, as it will most often only be used on one-on-one, sometimes 2 enemy brawlers, and never 3 unless the enemy team completely loses focus. Tara is normally about map control, but with the current layout, she must be played in the middle, limiting what other brawlers you can use in your comp. At number 19, we have Mortis. Going into this tier list, I originally thought Mortis would be much higher ranked than C tier. I figured that in the same way he was a decent gem grabber, he would be a bolt securer. I was correct, he is a good bolt securer, but as it turns out, he can't do much other than that, especially on defense. Defensively, he cannot fight the robot, as he does no damage, and his close range attacks put him in a terrible spot. Same offensively, he can't damage the Ike turret as well, because the Ike turret targets whoever's closest, meaning if he's attacking the turret, he's the closest. However, the factor that keeps him out of D or F tier is his alternative role. If paired with good defensive brawlers, Mortis can then take out the Siegers as an opportunity to strictly target enemy brawlers, stopping or distracting them on defense, and taking out enemy brawlers targeting the ally robot on offense. At number 18, and a shocker to a lot of people, I have Daryl. As much as Daryl impacts the meta, he just doesn't mix well with this mode. Due to his short range and small amount of health for a shotgunner, Daryl just always seems to be near death at every moment. The turret meta means that Daryl has to stay moving, and 2 or 3 of the maps having lots of walls makes it hard for Daryl to secure bolts with his ult. His redeeming factors are in offense and defense, as similar to Heist. Daryl can deal large chunks of damage to the Ike turret or the enemy robots, and can easily take out enemy brawlers, but it just has a hard time maneuvering on the map in the first place. At number 17 and wrapping up the seed tier is Poco. Poco is better than everyone seems to think. A lot of Brawl Stars YouTubers give Nita lots of credit for consistent damage, and Poco's very similar to this, but with less damage than Nita. Should you use Poco in solo queue? No. But does Poco work well in tank-dominated team comps? Yes. His auto, having the piercing ability, provides a decent amount of pressure that enemies will avoid, and pairing with tanks allows Poco to kite well. Poco's ult is pretty useful in this mode, as it works for securing bolts with the tanks. Also, you can't dock Poco, as he can do this. Starting off the B tier, and a pick that's sure to surprise everyone else, is Piper. Piper was given an F tier ranking in the other tier lists, but I gave her a shot, tried her in a few matches, and I'm pleasantly surprised. Similar to Brock, she applies a handful of pressure when enemies go for bolts, and she can effectively counter Penny, Jessie, Bo, and other non-tanky meta champs. Her ult has 2 uses, one being to secure a bolt when grabbed, much like Crow, and the other, much more important, is to stop the robot better than the other knockbacks. Piper will knock the robot back multiple times as opposed to just once for some brawlers like El Primo. Additionally, Piper is able to backdoor an enemy Ike turret for almost 10%, which can be used to clutch the late game. Piper's main weaknesses are simply her health being low and that 2 of the maps have walls. While the walls can work to her advantage with her doing peek shots, her best map is definitely Bot Drop, where the map is completely wide open. Similar to Piper, at number 15 I have Brock. Very similar to Piper in the basic auto attack being a high pressure snipe, but Brock has a few utilities that outshine Piper. The first is his star power. With the lasting burn effect, a few seconds can be enough to secure a bolt. Brock's ult also works well in this mode as it can chunk the robot decently and can reach the enemy Ike turret for some cheese damage. However, the ult really comes in handy during the bolt grab phases, as you know exactly where the enemy will be going, making positioning the ult center much easier. Brock also has a tad more health than some of the other long-range brawlers, which gives him the slight edge. At number 14 and our first heavyweight, we have Bull. Bull's game is all about forcing enemies off the bolts. He has huge presence, one of the highest in this game mode. With his health pool over 7,000, it's fairly easy to waltz in and grab a bolt, especially with his long-range ult. Bolt can be a reliable bolt carry, and when he dies, he's the fastest back into the game, as his long-range charge can put him from being in the spawn back into the middle of the map. His massive damage shots are also effective against the enemy Ike turret and the robot. Bull is a solid defensive pick and benefits from all 3 maps featuring bushes. Bull is limited to B tier due to nothing other than there being better defensive and offensive picks. At number 13, I have Colt. Colt will never be a bad pick in the mode due to the nature of his kit. A long-range spray of high damage bullets is perfect for this mode, allowing him free reign to poke down enemies. More importantly, Colt's ult is one of the more effective tools for destroying walls in this game, clearing the middle of the maps, or in case of bot drop, can clear out walls blocking the robot's path. One of the more important factors to consider is his ability to outrange and outdamage most of the meta brawlers. Before testing this mode myself, I speculated that Colt would be an S tier, but had to massively knock him down due to his weakness to throwers and his slight inferiority to Rico. Speak of the devil, Rico is number 12. Rico has less health and less damage than Colt, but the ability to bounce bullets works very well in the highly wall-based maps such as Some Assembly Required and Nuts and Bolts. Even without the walls, Rico provides enough range and damage to be a solid counter for many of the tanks who excel in this mode. Finishing off the B tier at number 11 is another surprising pick, Leon. Leon is good at every mode, but this is easily his worst. Leon does not have enough health to hold up well in Siege, and the damage nerf was actually enough to prevent him from a one-shot of a few key Siege champions. The fact that turrets play such a prominent role in securing the middle of the map does not bode well for Leon, as he is visible much more often. Additionally, with the current rotation of 1 brawler for every 3rd section, it's painfully obvious to tell when Leon is stealthed, and a lot of the map is covered, limiting Leon's mobility. Leon does possess the ability to be an extremely solid backdoor, being able to sneak up to the base and dealing 18% of the Ike turret's max health, and as always, Leon finds it easier to kill enemies than many other brawlers. Getting into the top 10 and finally getting into the A tier, we're kicking off with Spike. Spike's range really suits him well on this map, with the longest effective range in the game. Spike can poke at enemy turrets, and his attack also works well for the wall-based maps, as Spike curves around the walls easily. Due to the robot's big hitbox, Spike is also decent at defending against robot pushes. All of these advantages make up about half of Spike's usefulness, as his true power comes from his ultimate. The AoE slow is fantastic for map control, as well as chasing down enemies with bolts. No matter who you are, walking through a Spike ult to grab a bolt will lead to your death more times than not. At number 9, we have Pam. Pam is a fantastic choice for a mid-brawler. Her DPS is a force to be reckoned with, making it easy to secure bolts. The high health combined with the long range further helps to secure bolts. Due to the amount of walls in the 3 maps, Pam's healing turret sees a lot of use and is more effective than usual. While it is a small difference, it's important to note that Pam's turret can distract the robot for a few hits. Pam is one of the best choices for a bolt securer and can even shred through the robot's health plus the Ike turret. At number 8, we have the queen of consistency herself, Nita. Her controls allow for easy capture of the middle, and her bear is a decent tool for pressure. The bear is not perfect, however, as it does not deal high enough damage to completely shake off the tanks, who will walk in and out with a bolt easily. Nita is also not as powerful against the very common Penny, as comboing shots off the bear is a fast way to sabotage your own team. Nita's reload speed is very effective at keeping enemies off the map, as she can constantly pair up with her bear to force a retreat. The last note is her decent amount of health to provide that little bit of survivability that the other consistency brawlers like Poco are lacking. At number 7, we have Penny. Penny is the ultimate cheese of this game mode. She provides a massive amount of pressure and can take advantage of the opponent's miss rotations very easily. Her turret has a high impact damage value, making it so the enemy can't stand still on a bolt that's about to spawn in, and she can easily chunk shots on grouped enemies who miss-rotate on the same side. Her turret can outrange the Ike turret, so there are scenarios where you can sneak lots of percent onto the enemy Ike turret without a robot. When pushing with a robot, the turret is even more effective, as the enemies tend to group near the robot to attack it, making the turret shots hit much more often. When you have an enemy robot, 3 brawlers, and a turret to deal with, it's extremely easy to lose focus and collapse to one of the 5 threats. Where Penny lacks is her low health and her low DPS, but the turret makes up for almost any blemishes in her gameplay. Next, just missing out on S tier is Barley. Barley is one of 2 throwers in the game, and throwers have a very important role. Stop the 3 turrets. Pam, Penny, and Jessie are the 3 massive threats, and with the amount of walls in the maps, the only reliable way to counter the turrets are to use throwers. Barley specializes in control, as his shots linger around, allowing allies to have easy bolt access. His ult can cheese a decent percent onto the enemy Ike turret, as well as deal decent damage to the robot. Barley has an easy time landing shots as enemy brawlers gravitate towards bolts, and as with any map with walls, throwers will do well in the siege maps. Barley's one flaw is his low damage, as tanks can and will walk right through the attacks to get to the bolts. Since the game is structured with third sections, this means that Barley will have to go toe-to-toe with another brawler for the whole game, and in most 1v1 scenarios, Barley finds himself at a little bit of a disadvantage. Now we can move on to the S tiers. At number 5, we have Primo. Primo is a fantastic choice as a defensive and offensive tank. Primo wins almost every 1v1, and all 3 maps have great chemistry with Primo. 2 of the maps have walls, which helps bring the enemies close, and the map without walls has jump pads, which eliminates any mobility problem Primo would have. His ult is a game changer, being a wide-range AoE knockback, which can secure bolts, defend against enemy pushes, and provide massive pressure on ally pushes. In the event of a close game, Primo can ult and auto an Ike turret for over 15%, changing the tide of the game. Primo is also tied for the holder of the highest HP in the game, making throwers and low DPS brawlers almost completely useless. If Primo wants a bolt, he takes the bolt, and the other team has no say in it. The format of Siege games points heavily towards 1v1s, and Primo is the king of 1v1 fights, winning almost all matchups, regardless of whether he is placed in the middle, the left, or the right. At number 4, we have Bo. When Siege came out, the very first brawler I thought of to use was Bo. The recent damage buff gave him decent damage, and he seems to win almost all 1v1s due to his range and damage. Bo's star power works extremely well for all 3 maps, which have plenty of bushes. In a non-random team, Bo should be able to communicate this to allies, as most of the high-tier brawlers are high-damage tanks. Bo's ult is a solid ult that seems like it was specifically designed for this mode. If a bolt is spawning and Bo drops his ult on it, the enemy won't be able to get it, and it's almost a free ally bolt every time. The radius of the ult is also large and disrupts a large portion of the map. Most of the meta brawlers use turrets, and as Bo's ult is a throw, he can set his ult on turrets for a nice turret counter. The ult also serves well for a bot defense, the best defense in the game, due to the robot hitting each one at a time, for the total of 3 explosions and the longest delay. In the past, one of the pro Brawl Stars players ranked Bo as 22nd out of 22 brawlers at the time, saying, "Yeah, Bo has a lot of health, but what is he using it for?" The answer is here, as the large health pool finally comes to Bo's aid, being able to take an almost bruiser-style role as Bo continues to pressure the enemy. Bo's whole kit just appears to allow his team to be one step ahead for the whole match. When it comes to pressure, our number 3, Dynamite, is the key player in this whole entire mode. As a thrower, Dynamite is already primed for being a large asset in this mode, as both a marksman counter and a turret counter. Dynamite has a massive damage output, and with nothing but sheer force can clear the enemy team away. In the wall-dominated maps, Dynamite shines in denying bolts, and his knockback ult doesn't hurt in the slightest, as it helps defend, push, clear detrimental walls, and secure bolts. Dynamite has never had it easier to land both of his shots, as the location of the bolts shows early, meaning that by playing against the Dynamite, that 2,000 points of instant damage is always a looming threat every time you go to grab a bolt. At number 2, we have everybody else's number 1, Jessie. Jessie is an absolute powerhouse in this mode. The amount of disruption caused by her is enough to rival Dynamite, and she has utilities beyond that. Her bounce and her attack is a fantastic way to punish brawlers who misrotate, and even those who don't now have to constantly focus on not just the brawler in front of them, but also the attacks coming in from the side. The turret Jessie has is the most effective turret in the game, providing constant pressure, heal deny, a way to tank the robot/Ike turret, a counter to shotgunners, and a declaration of field presence. Jessie has a decent health pool capable of long fights, and her attacks deal over 1,000 damage per shot, meaning a threat for even tanks. On an offensive push, the turret provides what Penny's turret does, creating a 5th crazy element to deal with, simply overwhelming the opponent. Being able to attack her own turret with the star power allows for the whole team to get a few extra seconds of damage on the enemy Ike turret, as well as just further secure the middle of the field during bolt phase. Jessie's only weak point is on defense, as her damage isn't as high as a defensive counter should be, but even on defense, Jessie is strong, as the enemy feels disrupted having to dodge Jessie's shots every time she hits the robot. Now Kairos always chooses a golden S tier, and to follow suit, I chose one as well. My number 1 pick and by golden S tier is Frank, and I believe Frank is the best solo queue siege choice. Tied with Primo for the largest amount of health in the game, Frank just shows massive pressure everywhere he goes. His range for a tank is huge, allowing for bolt secure. His high health is enough to walk through attacks for a bolt. His ult charges in just 3 hits, meaning it's up constantly. When his ult is out, the enemy has an absolute 0% chance of grabbing a bolt close to Frank due to the shock of the stun. If an enemy is stunned, Frank can get his ult back almost right after the stun is over. On defense, Frank can stun the whole robot, giving the whole entire allied team plus Ike turret a free damage session on the robot, making Frank the best choice on defense. And on offense, Frank can stun the enemy Ike turret for an easy siege onto the enemy base. If Frank lands his ult on all 3 brawlers, he instantly gets it back, and timed rate with a powerful robot, Frank would be able to effectively one-shot the Ike turret before any of the enemies died. Hitting all 3 enemies is not as tough as it sounds either, as everyone tends to group to the robot to fight it. Frank's ult can break detrimental walls, stun turrets that are present in the meta, and he absolutely rips through Jessie, Dynamite, Bo, Penny, Barley, and other common high-tier brawlers. The 2 maps with walls suit Frank phenomenally, as he can peek shots for easy hits, and the open map, much like Primo, takes any mobility disadvantage and chucks it out the window with the addition of jump pads. Frank's nature of his kit just screams siege, and he will always be my go-to for siege as long as his ult remains as a stun. By using this list and a lot of hours of experimentation, it seems like the most effective team comp when available, with communications such as voice chat or playing in person, is Primo, Jessie, and Bo. All 3 can flex to whatever needed position, with the range of all 3 ults being able to reach the middle from anywhere. Where Jesse lacks in defensive robot damage, it's made up of by Primo's DPS and Bo's ult. Where Primo's lack of range is present, Jesse and Bo's ult/star power can relieve him of that pressure. If needed, both Primo and Bo have effective ways to backdoor victory should the opponent Ike turret be low, and all three have extremely prominent center control. Primo could be swapped with Frank. Frank does not have the backdoor potential, but he has greater defensive and offensive presence. Before I wrap this video up, I really want to give thanks to the 5 people that I'm showing on the screen now. These 5 were the ones who helped me make this video possible by playing games with me for hours, commenting on my tier lists, making their own judgments, especially Mike and Proxy, who sat through 3 straight hours of Siege filming with me, and Draco, who completely tore apart my tier list trying to make it better. So I thank you all for helping me with that. And with that, this is Panda Parade, signing off.